The 6th of June, 1944, Normandy. At dawn, the sea is crowded with ships and the sky thunders with planes as Allied soldiers storm the beaches of France. The largest invasion in history is underway. For months, the Germans have waited, unsure where the blow would fall, and now their worst fears materialize. Yet even as the first waves of troops fight their way ashore, another battle is already being waged in the shadows. In Berlin, weeks earlier, a woman's voice, calm and persuasive, had carried across the airwaves, warning that this invasion would end in slaughter of the Allied troops. Her broadcast, called Vision of Invasion, mixed the sound of crashing waves with the cries of dying men. It painted a picture of mothers weeping and sweethearts betrayed, urging soldiers to question the cause for which they were about to die. It was propaganda carefully crafted to break courage at the very moment it was most needed. Allied commanders dismissed it as enemy play, but among the men the voice was known and occasionally whispered about. They called her Axis Sally or Bitch of Berlin. But her real name is Mildred Gillars. Mildred Gillars was born as Mildred Elizabeth Sisk on the 29th of November 1900 in Portland in the state of Maine in the United States. Her parents were Vincent Sisk and May Hewitson. After they divorced, she moved with her mother to the state of Ohio, where May remarried Robert Bruce Gillars. Young Mildred took his surname. Restless and ambitious, Mildred dreamed beyond the small-town world around her. She studied art and music, hoping to become an actress. In 1918, she attended Ohio Wesleyan University, but never graduated, leaving in 1922 before completing her degree. Gillars then moved to New York City, where she worked in various low-skilled jobs to finance her drama lessons. Yet despite her determination, she was unable to establish a theatrical career. Mildred was drawn toward Europe and went there with her mother in 1929. She studied in France for 6 months and later returned to the United States. In 1933, Gillars left the United States again and traveled abroad, living for a while in North Africa and then in France. She eventually settled in Germany in 1934, not long after Adolf Hitler had taken power in January 1933. Berlin in those years was both intoxicating and intimidating. Foreigners found themselves in a city that combined vibrant culture with an ever-tightening grip of Nazi dictatorship. Parades, banners, and loudspeakers filled the streets, while the voice of Joseph Goebbels' propaganda ministry reached into every home. The radio, once a simple piece of household furniture, became a weapon of politics, carrying the Führer's speeches to millions. For someone like Mildred, whose heart longed for drama and theater, Berlin provided an unusual stage. She supported herself by teaching English and working in small theater productions. Yet as the decade advanced, her life was increasingly shaped by the Nazi regime that dominated all aspects of public expression. Everything changed on the 1st of September 1939 when Nazi Germany attacked Poland and the Second World War began. During the war, the Goebbels' Ministry of Propaganda sought out people who could speak to foreign audiences, and Gillars, with her fluent English and her flair for performance, eventually came to their attention. In 1940, she took a position as a radio broadcaster for the Reichs-Rundfunk-Gesellschaft, the German state radio. She began in light entertainment, but later became the station's highest-paid employee. As the war deepened and Germany found itself in direct conflict not only with Britain, but also with the United States, her role shifted. It was possible also thanks to the fact that she did not listen to calls made by US State Department, which was advising American citizens to leave Germany and German-controlled territories. However, Gillars did not listen and chose to remain also because her fiancé, Paul Carlson, a naturalized German citizen, said he would never marry her if she returned to the United States. Shortly afterwards, Carlson was sent to the Eastern Front, where he was killed, and Gillars was trapped in Nazi Germany. Gillars did not have any more options, and in 1942 she had begun delivering programs aimed at Allied soldiers. Her voice was clear, her American accent authentic, and her ability to sound conversational gave her broadcasts a persuasive quality. Soon, she became known to the Allied troops as Axis Sally, the female voice of German propaganda. But she also got another nickname, in which the emotions of the American soldiers she spoke to were revealed. They called her Bitch of Berlin. Her broadcasts were designed to demoralize soldiers and to sow doubt among civilians at home. Gillars often spoke in a calm, almost sympathetic tone, as if she were a friend telling secrets. In programs such as Home Sweet Home, she painted pictures of life back in America. She described wives and girlfriends who might be unfaithful, families struggling without their sons, and lives lost in pointless sacrifice. The intention was to weaken soldiers by striking at their personal fears. She broadcasted also in program Midge at Mike, with a goal to spread defeatist propaganda and anti-Semitic rhetoric. In the program GI's Letterbox and Medical Reports, she was talking directly to the American audience in the States. She was using information which she obtained from American airmen who were shot down over Europe. Gillars was visiting hospitals and interviewing prisoners of war, falsely claiming to be a representative of the International Red Cross, and then used information received from them in her broadcasting to weaken the morale of the American civilian population at home. One of her most notorious broadcasts aired on the 11th of May 1944, just before the Allied invasion of France. In a dramatized program called Vision of Invasion, she played the role of an American mother who dreams that her son had died a horrific death on a ship in the English Channel during an attempted invasion of occupied Europe. In the dream, the son came to her after his death and told her of the horror he saw, whilst in the background there were shrieks and moans of men suffering in battle. For the Germans, it was meant to be a masterpiece of psychological warfare. For the soldiers who heard it, it was a chilling broadcast, though many later claimed they laughed it off as propaganda nonsense. The truth lies somewhere in between. Allied soldiers did listen to Axis Sally, and Allied intelligence services monitored her broadcasts closely. Her effectiveness was not in persuading men to switch sides. Not one deserted because of her nice voice, but in planting shadows of doubt in the minds of men before the battle. She became infamous enough that the soldiers joked about her. The nicknames Axis Sally and Bitch of Berlin stuck, and her voice became one of the most recognizable sounds of the enemy's propaganda machine. Life in Berlin during those years gave her a strange prominence. She lived under the protection of Goebbels' Ministry of Propaganda and Public Enlightenment, enjoying comfort compared to ordinary Germans who endured bombings, rationing, and the collapse of daily life. Despite the fact that she was living a good life in Nazi Germany, she later said that she remained only because of her personal ties, including a relationship with Max Otto Koschwitz, who was a program director in the German state radio where Gillars was working. This statement conflicts with her oath of allegiance to Adolf Hitler, as pointed out by the prosecution in her trial after the war. As the war turned against Germany, her broadcasts became increasingly desperate. After D-Day, with Allied troops advancing in France and the Red Army pushing from the east, Gillars continued to insist that victory for the Reich was possible and that the Allies would be crushed. But in Berlin itself, the collapse was visible. By the spring of 1945, as Soviet artillery thundered on the outskirts of the city, the radio stations fell silent one by one. The Reich was reduced to ruins. When Nazi Germany finally surrendered in May 1945, Mildred Gillars was still in Berlin, surrounded by the ruins of the regime she had served. For months, she avoided capture, blending into the chaos of occupied Germany, selling her furniture in markets and avoiding posters, asking questions about her whereabouts. But in March 1946, American counterintelligence agents tracked her down. She was arrested and after some time returned to the United States to face trial for treason. Her arrival was widely reported in the American press, which portrayed her as a notorious voice of the enemy. For many who had fought against the Axis powers, she was the embodiment of betrayal, a woman who had used her nationality and language to wound her own countrymen. The trial began on the 25th of January, 1949 in Washington, D.C., and Gillars listened as prosecutors laid out the case. They presented transcripts of her broadcasts, recordings of her voice, and testimony from soldiers who had heard her on the air. The most damning evidence was the Vision of Invasion broadcast, which prosecutors argued had directly aided the German war effort by attempting to undermine Allied morale on the eve of D-Day and invasion of Europe. Gillars defended herself by claiming she had acted under pressure, that she had feared imprisonment or death if she refused to cooperate with Nazi authorities. She insisted that she had never truly betrayed her country, that she had only played a role assigned to her. Her lawyers argued that she was more of an actress than a traitor, and even argued that Gillars was under the hypnotic influence of German program director Koischwitz, and therefore not fully responsible for her actions until after his death in 1944. Yet the jury was not convinced. After weeks of testimony, she was found guilty of treason, specifically for the Vision of Invasion broadcast. On the 10th of March 1949, she was stripped of her US citizenship and sentenced to 10 to 30 years in prison and a fine of $10,000, an equivalent of more than 135,000 United States dollars today. After serving 12 years, she was released in 1961. She returned to Ohio, where she lived under her own name once again. She never married or had children, and she lived in relative obscurity and worked for a time at a convent school, having converted to Catholicism while in prison. Throughout her life, Gillars remained unapologetic about her association with Nazism. Shortly before her death, she reportedly showed a neighbor a cup that she had described as one of her most cherished possessions, saying it had been given to her by Heinrich Himmler, the leader of the SS, and one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. Mildred Gillars, once known as Bitch of Berlin, died on the 25th of June 1988, at the age of 87, largely forgotten by the world that had once known her voice so clearly. But her legacy endures, a warning of how propaganda can travel in familiar tones, how betrayal can wear a friendly face, and how a single voice carried through the airwaves could be turned into a weapon. Before we end today's story, take a look at worldhistory.tv, your special destination for true history lovers. Discover exclusive documentaries and incredible stories you won't find anywhere else. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.